Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first local intergovernmental budget roundtable for the Sunshine Coast. I'd like to start it by thanking everyone today for being here and acknowledging that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the territories of the Shishal and Squamish Nations. After several years of varying success at information sharing around budgets, we've decided to try and do something new for this year's budget process. And for those following along at home, my name is Alton Toth. I'm a councillor with the District of Sechelt and the current board chair of the SCRD. Over the next couple of hours, we're going to hear from the local governments on the Sunshine Coast about their 2025 budgets and organizational priorities. After each presentation, we'll open it up for 2 questions from other local elected. And after all of the presentations are done, we'll open it up for any questions from the public. And we don't have any online attendees yet. I do see that we've got at least one public attendee here in the room with us. For those of you who are joining us online, watching on YouTube, welcome and thank you for tuning in. And while we all know each other at this table, not everybody knows who we are. And we do have a couple of new faces in the room. So I'd like to ask each elected to introduce themselves, their local government, and tell us their favorite government department. We're doing an icebreaker, as much as I hate them. After that, we'll have each of the staff introduce themselves, and we'll just assume that all of their favorite departments are finance, or they wouldn't be with us today. And just a reminder for those at home, to be able to hear us, we do need to use the microphones. And yeah, so with that, Alton Toth, District of Sechelt, councillor. Parks is my favorite division.
Good afternoon. I'm Justine Gabias. I'm the area director for Half Moon Bay Hualquai. And right now, right this minute, my favorite department is IT because of this awesome new camera system. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Kate Louise Stamford, Area F, Valcotsum House Sound. My favorite department, always mapping. Love the mapping.
Good afternoon, Kelly Bax, Huesum Roberts Creek, Area D representative, and I have to say my favorite department at the moment is Emergency Services.
Hi, I'm Leonard Lee, Area A, Egmont Pender Harbor. My favorite department is reception. They make us coffee and bring us cookies. They're just great.
Doggone. So he got my favorite department. I'm Donna McMahon, Area E, Elphinstone, also known as West Gibsons. Favorite department? Transit.
I didn't know that. I got you on record. Silas White, Mayor of Gibsons, and Town of Gibsons Director on the Regional District. I feel awkward about playing favorites, so I think I'll say my favorite department is the street lighting functions in the Regional District, since I'm not even sure who's in charge of that, so then I'm not playing any favorites.
David Kroll, Councillor, Town of Gibsons. Favorite department, I would say infrastructure.
Darren Inkster, District of Sechelt and the SCRD, and my favorite department is wastewater. No, I'm kidding. But I bet you Adam Shepard can tell me what my favorite department is.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, geez. Parks. 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 Okay, got the wrong guy. Yeah.
Diane McLaughlin, District of Sechelt. Diane McLaughlin, District of Sechelt. I'm thinking it's engineering because they are so important in terms of getting basic things in the ground and helping us get that capital budget spent. Thank you.
Adam Shepard, District of Sechelt, Councillor. My favorite department, obviously, finance. They finance everything.
Donna Bell, District of Sechelt Councillor, and I do wear 2 hats. Do I dare even bring it up today? Working with our minister, or our Member of Parliament, Patrick Weiler, for the Liberals. Excuse me. And my favorite department is Human Resources.
John Henderson, Mayor of Sechelt, and as a CA, and I don't want to just be copying Councillor Shepherd, but finance rocks.
All right, and then we'll go to the staff table for introductions as well. Why don't we start with the town of Gibsons?
Hello, William Wallace. I'm the Director of Finance at the town of Gibsons.
Tina Perot. I am the Chief Financial Officer here at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. Thank you.
Dave Douglas. I'm the Director of Finance from the District of Sechelt, and finance is my favorite department.
Hello. Andrew Allen, Director of Planning and Development from the District of Sechelt.
Hello, Megan Lee, Director of Engineering and Operations, District of Sechelt.
He doesn't have a microphone, but Manny, the CAO from the town of Gibsons, is here with us as well. So, all right, introductions done and underway. Those following along at home have heard all our voices, so hopefully can keep track of the questions we ask. The first presentation is going to be from the SCRD, and so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tina Perot, our CFO.
All right, so here is my cover presentation. First slide really is a retrospective of some accomplishments from 2024. So as you can see in some of these pictures here, we have some water drilling in some of our test sites throughout the mid-coast here, our Fire Smart program, several parks program, and some improvements within the Sechelt Aquatic Facility for the fire system there. We have, of course, our installation of meters. And the one picture in the middle that looks like someone's on the moon is actually our bio cover at the Sechelt landfill. So we actually did a press release at the end of 2024, just giving a highlight of some of the projects that were completed this year at the regional district. So for 2025 budget, our focus has been on our capacity within the regional district. We've been talking a lot about the various projects that have culminated since about 2020, since the pandemic, and how those have accumulated to well over 200. Some of them are a combination of operational projects, initiative policy development, and capital projects. And so we have been focusing on our capacity analysis, which I'll talk a little bit about as well. So from an overall perspective of our budget, proposals have focused on underfunding of services, so maintaining key service levels and ensuring that we have enough funding to maintain service levels. And so there's been a focus on trying to reduce scope of some of our projects as well. So of course, our strategic plan really leads our discussions for the budget with the main focus of water stewardship and solid waste solutions. And so that has been one of the key 2 focus areas of our budget this year. So in talking about what we're calling our draft corporate plan and some of our corporate priorities, we have been trying to develop and align resources with our various projects within the organization. And so that isn't something that we've done holistically here at the regional district. And so this has been a very illuminating undertaking. It's still in the works, and so we look to complete that particular process once the 2025 budget is complete. We have gone through various iterations and have presented those at our budget deliberations, the first one being at our pre-budget at the end of October. And so we hope to bring the culmination towards the end of February or early March. So from a budget timeline perspective, we did instigate our pre-budget process last year. We actually did not undergo a pre-budget process, and the purpose of that is to really give a high level of our various proposals that are coming forward, our capital plans, and our carry forwards for the coming year. So we have done both our pre-budget and our round one at the end of November, and we are looking to conclude our budget deliberations on round two next week. And we hope to be finished all on Monday, but that might be optimistic with our budget adoption mid-February. So just to give a high-level overview of where the regional district budgets have come from 2019, and of course our 2025 is still in draft, and so we can see there has been an escalation in our budget, and most of that has been the result of our increase in capital plans. I think one things that I always make of note is that this is not actual figures, these are budgeted figures, so they're not cumulative. So some of these capital projects have been sitting there on the books for multiple years. So that is the case again for 2025. So how we classify our budget proposals is through our mandatory projects, so things that have to be done. Imminent asset failure, we have some regulatory requirements, things that are safety related, and those are built right into our budget through our pre-budget process, so there's no deliberations associated to those. Focusing on strategic or things that maintain current service levels, and discretionary, and those are things that may come through board resolutions, they may come through community groups, or maybe staff initiated. So some of the budget mandatories that were included in our budget this year were things related to a lot of the key focus areas within our strategic plan, and those are, of course, you can see upgrades to the Chapman Water Treatment Plan and Solms Creek monitoring compliance. But we also had some health and safety related ones, so you can see some noxious weed removal in John Daly Park. It's quite a pervasive issue up there, as well as some increased information technology, data storage, and maintain our business continuity. So again, illuminating on some of the strategic priorities that are coming through budget. Some of these have been approved in our round one budget deliberations, but some are coming again for decision for round two, and those include the Langdale Wellfield. So our round two budget agenda has been published, so you can always refer to these. We are also looking to the feasibility for the study for the raw water reservoirs. And again, to highlight that we are in a joint partnership application with our partners at the Sechelt Nation for the reservoirs for Lower Crown and secondary water storage for there. We also have a lot of focus on our water and wastewater facilities. So there's a lot of infrastructure upgrades and maintaining service level there. So some of the service level decisions, so one of the main ones was our transit expansion for 2025. So those look to be starting up at mid next year. And so if anyone recalls, there was a decision by the board to accelerate some of the transit expansion. And so those have been included in our financial plan. And we look forward to those. And so those will need some approval through BC Transit. We're also looking to do our upgrades to Mason Road, and if anyone recalls, there has been some public information just about the presentation that was here regarding some upgrades to our Mason Road, including transit expansion and some options that we need to do, including some magnitude of cost. And again, we're continuing to explore our implementation of our firefighter compensation action plan. So that is addressing compensation for our volunteer group. So that has been something that's been ongoing, and we look forward to concluding that process. And so we have several operational items as well, so just maintaining services. So again, part of our budget process is to invite our community partners, and we fund almost $2 million. And here's just a little illustration of some of the community groups that are part of already established regional district services, which include our museums, public libraries, Sunshine Coast Tourism, and some of our community schools. So here is getting into some of the figures for regional district taxation. And so what this illustrates is if all of the budget proposals that were put forward and are pending for round two, this would be the final taxation figures. Of course, these are subject to change to our provincial or BC assessment values, which haven't been integrated into here. And the impact of that just means there's maybe just a slight change as far as the apportionment goes. And again, if some of these budget proposals don't go forward, some of these figures will decrease. So this is an illustration of the highest magnitude that we could see for property taxation. So our proposed staffing plan for 2025, I just showed a historical assessment here. And so for 2025, our estimated staffing or approval is at about 261, I think, there. And so you can see that there's an increase to 2026. And that's because when we approve staffing or new staffing resources, they are prorated for 2025, just understanding that we're not going to hire people because our budget's approved in February, we can't start the recruitment process till after that. So we have various timeframes when we see people coming online. And some positions are coming offline due to term positions that we've approved in the past. So there's just a summary there for you. And so we also approved our utility rates for water at the end of November. We had a special committee on November 21st. Those bylaws were approved on December 14th. And so for North Pender, we're looking at approximately an overall cost per year of about $1,500. The North Pender system has under 1,000 users on it, so it's quite a small, but that's equivalent to about $4 a day of water. For South Pender, about the same equivalent, the fees, and that has not been the case in past years. They were actually quite different between the North and South Pender, and now we're seeing that there's a equity there. And so both of these water systems we took over in around 2007, 2008, those water improvement systems, and so there's still a lot of deferred capital renewal that needs to happen in these systems, and more to come, especially in North Pender, where it's looking like we're going to need to implement some water treatment that we haven't had in the prior years. So for our regional water system, we're looking at for 2025 overall cost of about $1,200, which equates to about $3.37 per day. If any of you were following along in some of the decision-making for our approval of our bylaws, the board did want to come back with a rate that was reflective in and around inflation, so we ended up with just over a 5% increase for 2025. So we did want to also highlight, because it's one of the key strategic focus areas of one of the projects, is where is our volumetric billing at? And so for North and South Pender, we're going to be implementing what we call mock billing for 2025 with the eye to implement actual billing in 2026. In December, we brought forward some decisions for the board on how we were going to do our billing. And essentially, there was some approval for us to move forward with that mock billing. So we'll be bringing some illustration to people with our usage on a quarterly basis. And then we will be looking to complete the implementation or installation of the meters this year for the regional system in the District of Sechelt in and around, I think, July. So we will start as soon as humanly possible that mock billing process with our regional system. So with that, for those online and those listening in, we can find all of our agendas on our website as well as our Let's Talk page, and you can submit questions on there. And so now I will take questions here in the gallery. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO. We're ahead of schedule, so feel free to ask questions, folks. But yeah, are there any questions from the elected? Donna?
Thank you. I'm not sure. I'm just wondering about the future for electric buses. I know at some point there is going to be some electric buses coming to the Sunshine Coast. Have you been given any further information as to when that might be? We're still waiting at the Fed level, but I just wondered if you have heard anything.
Yes, we are working on BC Transit. Right now, that is one of the barriers is our Mason Road site. So BEB buses are significantly heavier. And so essentially our site needs to be designed for that, but there is intention to at least bring some pilots in the near term. I can't recall the exact date, but that is part of when BC Transit brings the TIPS program. So essentially that's the infrastructure approval process. Those were modeled into some of the plans. So hopefully in the near future, and it's definitely, I think, awaiting some funding decisions. So thank you.
And the other thing, just to add on to that with transit, is that it's not going to be a wholesale fleet replacement at one time, right? As buses are retired, they'll be upgraded and replaced with battery electric, hopefully. But yeah, Mason Road Yards doesn't have the electrical capacity at this time to even really contemplate bus charging infrastructure. So, yeah. Adam?
Just a quick question. First of all, this is the first time this kind of group meetings happen, which is terrific. It's great to hear the goals and directives. I'm just wondering, through establishing those goals, could you comment on the efforts between the governments to share services, to economize, to make use of what resources each government has? Thanks.
No, it's okay. I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, well, I don't know how this question management's going to come up when it's not Tina and I talking about the projects. So maybe the mayors will have to do the same thing with their own local government presentations. But I think one thing that I want to speak to before I turn it over to Tina is that staff at all levels do work with their municipal counterparts. Whether it's finance, whether it's the parks folks, they're getting together on a fairly regular basis to talk through ways that they can do things better, do things together within the restrictions and envelopes and things that they do have in place. But Tina, I don't know if you want to speak to that more.
So yes, we do that on a number of fronts, whether it's CAOs, CFOs, communications teams, parks teams, infrastructure teams. And so some of the projects that are on the docket that we're doing jointly are things like the sports field strategy. And so that's something that is not one specific government's projects. It's a joint project that we all have and we're all collectively sharing. I think with the regional accessibility, that's another area where we're all working together. And so it'll be interesting once that plan is completed, how we can use that to leverage and inform decisions. I think the regional districts also runs a lot of regional services. So whether or not there are things that we can partner in the future related to solid waste programming, those are things that I think are what helps with these joint ventures and discussions is so we can explore those, such as like the water summits and solid waste summits that we think about hosting in the future.
Thank you. Kate.
Thank you. This is a very clear presentation for public engagement, and I'm really glad to see it done this way. One of the questions that I could see arising is on one page we talk about the budget increase over 10 years, and you mentioned that capitalization is not cumulative in the numbers. Could you just clarify what that meant?
The slide I presented was our budget, not our actual. And so what's very different is if I mirrored that slide against the actual, which is in our annual report each June, that would be quite a different illustration. So I think last year our actual spend was far less because the actual amount we capitalize at the end of the year does not reflect our budget.
Thank you. Silas, did I see you reaching for the mic? Go ahead.
I should just say we've got one empty seat at the table here over the town, and I want to just convey the regrets from Councillor Lumley because he's opening a restaurant tomorrow. It's kind of exciting in Gibsons, but he's really, speaking of financial crunches, he's been dealing with that in his professional life and trying to get a restaurant open. So his number one department is definitely finance. So Councillor Kroll and I will have to try to fill in for some of the questions he may have asked. I'm going to bring up some things that directors have heard from me before, but I think it merits this context needs to be brought up at this forum too. I think is helpful. I think we really need to recognize with an overview of all this that local governments across Canada are really feeling the crunch. The fiscal framework of basically being reliant on property taxes is not going to be able to sustain us with the asset management challenges that we're all facing. And we're definitely seeing that on the Sunshine Coast. It's with the limited ability we have to raise revenue right now, I'm not happy kind of going to those little limited windows that we have. Really, we need more support from the senior levels of government to at least allow us to have more flexibility to raise revenue. So I'll touch on some of the ones where we are stuck, the old traditional ways. Utility rates. As you'll hear in our presentation, Gibsons does have water and sewer. Sechelt has some utility rates too, but I'm interested in hearing about Sechelt. But I think we're finding in Gibsons strongly that there may be inflation, which is high generally, and I appreciate the SCRD board's interest in trying to keep, for taxpayers, keeping that inflation or keeping the utility rate raised to inflation. But then there's inflation for water mains and all the things that we need to pay for utilities, and it's way higher than general inflation. And that's something we've been needing to grapple with the town of Gibsons, and we need to grapple with it as a community. And we, as ratepayers, we're going to need to pay for it. Those are the limited ways of paying for our services that local governments have. So I'm wondering with the modest utility rate increase that was tried to be brought down to inflation, or general inflation, how does that compare to what the actual costs are that we're looking at the SCRD for maintaining utilities? Because I imagine they're a lot higher. Paying for those if they're not from the utility rates sustainably.
The report that was presented to the committee on November 21st and then subsequent to the board in December was far higher. It was over double. It was in the 10-11% range. And that was because over the years, both the operating and capital reserves for the regional water system in particular had been significantly depleted. The recommended rates for North and South Pender were approved as presented, and that's, I think, recognizing the significant infrastructure investment that we need in those particular systems. And so we already know there's a significant shortfall just with our preliminary asset management plans for the need for capital renewal. Like, we have less than $10 million in reserves for our regional water system, and far less for our operating reserves. And so we may be constrained even this year if something emergent happens. So we gave those considerations to the board, but I think at some point we won't be able to rely on other level of government to fund infrastructure renewal or even expansion, which is what we are really looking at for our water supply systems. And not to mention the significant infrastructure improvements that what we need for solid waste coming in the next 10, 15 years, and that is dependent on the success of our vertical expansion project at that landfill to extend the life. So yeah, we're going to be faced with a lot of very significant infrastructure challenges, and we will have to work with our higher levels of government to fund them.
I know my own perspective when I talk about inflation with people, the very first thing I do with them is get them to understand that, you know, the inflation rates that are published in the newspaper are things like milk and bread and eggs and, you know, grocery items. And for the most part, that's not what local government's buying, right? You know, steel and concrete and consulting services are not at all in line with that. Yeah, and so having that conversation with people is something that, like, you for me, I struggle to get that through to a lot of people. When we talk about inflation, we're talking about two different sets of numbers, right? Yeah. Donna?
One of the things that often is asked in some of our conversations, what keeps you up at night? And for me, it's still emergency preparedness. And as I look at the news today and I look at what's happening in California, I can't help but think about, you know, where we're at with this. So my question is not to get into the operational weeds on this, but just to know that we're moving forward on more of a regional emergency preparedness plan. It's still in here. We're having the discussions more regionally than just in our local you know, meetings, that kind of thing. I just want to get a sense of where that fits into our strategy.
So internally, we've had a new position that was just recently filled with a senior manager of protective services with a focus, acknowledging that there needs to be more of a heightened focus on emergency preparedness here at the regional district. There is a lot of pending work. One is aligning our bylaws and making sure we collectively understand what that regional model is going to look like for emergency preparedness. He just started in beginning of November, and so he is also responsible for the volunteer fire departments, the 4 volunteer fire departments here, as well as 911. And so we are faced with multiple budget proposals for those, but we're also looking at some additional regional grants. And I think this is an area that we need to focus on, at least from a staffing level, from the CEOs, CAOs, as well as CFOs, to talk more about how we can elevate this as a priority within our just jointly how we can focus on that.
Thank you. Kelly and then David.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted Councillor Bell to know that just at lunch today, we were working on some resolutions that we're going to bring forward at AVICC. And of the 3 resolutions that we talked about, 2 of them had to do with emergency preparedness in one way or another. And so it is top of mind for the Regional District Board.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to the upgrade of Mason Road, and obviously with the transfer to electric buses, there needs to be a significant power upgrade. Is the funding for that being provided by through Clean BC, or is this a cost that's going to be borne by the regional district and the local transit authority?
So we're at the very preliminary phases, and I think right now we've just completed a site assessment for Mason Road, and we have determined that likely the recommendation is that transit needs to relocate from the Mason Road yard. So there's still more to come as far as what the next steps are for the site and how that will be funded. We don't have the answers on that.
But I do want to just add that one of the things that was presented is that like the project for a new transit depot, including the electrification, things like that, could be $40 to $50 million. But there is an opportunity for a lot of that to be funded through lease agreements with BC Transit, where they cover the capital infrastructure, and then we're funding a lease agreement with them to pay for the facility. So it's not like the regional district would have to come up with $40 million to start the project. So there's a lot of work that's been happening, or that's going to be happening with regards to transit yard, siting, planning, design, land acquisition, that sort of thing. Go ahead.
Just to follow up to that, if I may, I know SD 46 has been talking about transitioning through their fleet of school buses to electric buses. So is there joint sort of collaboration going on between the school district and BC Transit to create one facility to support electric buses on the coast?
BC Transit, the school district is not a service participant of BC Transit. However, staff have been in discussions with the school district, and we have been keeping them apprised of our project and have definitely shared information amongst each other. I think their timelines are a little bit different than ours, so we'll have to continue those conversations and see where synergies can be made.
Right on. Any other questions from the elected? Silas?
I've always got some. And I hope you all appreciate the consistency of the town of Gibson's having the same concerns all the time. I think Councillor Kroll's last question was word for word a question I asked a month or two ago. Let's go with the budget process. I want to say I'm really pleased and encouraged with how the numbers are looking this year compared to previous years. There was a fear I've had and I've expressed that we're at the SCRD, we were kind of seemingly stuck on a road of having to sustain double-digit tax increases just automatically for the foreseeable future. So I want to commend the board and staff here on rolling that back and really taking a hard look at things in the process and getting not succumbing to that fate. And on that, I think we did talk at the SCRD board about establishing a mandate about kind of looking early on what kind of overall tax increase, and recognizing it's different for every area, but general average tax increase can our taxpayers really sustain, and trying to bring everything into line with that, which is more what the municipal process is. Understandably, the municipal process is a lot. It's easier, it's clearer, but I just want to ask on how. I mean, I know we tried. We talked about a mandate at least this year, and how did that discussion kind of help to influence where we ended up here? And maybe is it like could we have a clearer mandate in the future of kind of deciding? I mean, we talk about it at municipal level. We'll kind of start by going, okay, I think we're going to aim for a overall 3% or an overall 3.5% or something, and that's where we often start things out. That's what I'm talking about with the mandate.
I actually think for us, the higher priority was the corporate planning and the internal work of trying to make sure we didn't carry too many projects over that we weren't going to start, or that we were going to start and not get finished. And I'd like to think that helped staff sort of recognize the level of submissions to the board had to come down somewhat from years past. I don't know if, Tina, you wanted to chime in from the staff side of things. Yeah, okay. Kate.
And in follow-up to that, I mean, I think our CFO has described a weakness in that potential approach, and that we are continuing to underfund long-term capitalization and infrastructure, potentially because we're trying to keep things reasonable and doing what we can. there is that flip side to it, is trying to build the right level of operation and capitalization to keep us going, especially with emergencies popping up. So I am concerned about that when we hear it. And we're trying to keep that balance somehow.
David?
Thank you. Going back to Director Perot's opening slide with the bio cover for the landfill, does this mitigate the emission of methane? And if there's a potential to capture methane, is this something that could be a source of potential power?
So yes, that is one of the largest reductions in our corporate GHG that we implemented very quickly after doing our GHG assessment. And so yes to the first one, yes, it reduces our corporate emissions. So we look forward to seeing what our new reports are as we implement these really quick wins. The second part to your question, we tried that in 2009, we were successful with a Strategic Priorities Fund grant, and the technology to implement gas to energy, that technology no longer existed, and so we had to actually abandon that particular project, and we had to return the funds to the feds on it. To my knowledge, and I have not attest to have done any further research, but the size of our landfill does make it difficult to make that a viable solution. We also don't currently have a lined landfill. So there's significant things going against us to be able to implement that type of technology, but it could be something we do in the future if we ever did move to a new landfill site.
All right. I think that's the end. Oh, go ahead, Silas.
The end, too. I mean, there's a lot of big picture questions, but I don't see that on the agenda, really. Like, should we wait until...
I don't know. I mean, how's everybody feeling? If you wanted to do big picture now, or we could get the presentations.
I think I'll wait because some of these things are good for all of our CFOs to weigh in on, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think with that, we'll take a quick break and then we'll do the Town of Gibson's presentation. It says 10 minutes in here, but if we want to leave a little bit of time for some broader questions, how does everybody feel about just like a 5-minute break? And then we'll get back at it. Okay, sounds good. All right, and welcome back to the 2025 Regional Budget Roundtable. For the next presentation, we're going to go to the town of Gibsons and the CFO, William Wallace. So welcome. We'll turn the presentation over to you, and then Mayor White will stick handle the questions from the elected. So take it away.
Thank you very much. This is a brief presentation. Most of what I'm going to say is just to clarify the bullet points because otherwise there can be misunderstandings. So this first one, and the slides follow the proposed layout we received from the regional district. This first one deals with 2025 budget priorities, and in terms of maintaining service levels, a very big one for the town has turned out to be staff retention, service delivery capacity. So the town just concluded a new collective agreement for the years up there, 4 years, 5, 4, 4, 3.5. Buried in those figures is an estimated catch-up of 7.6%. So the town wanted to make good with its people because, of course, cost escalations had been much greater in the previous collective agreement than anyone had anticipated. In addition to that, Council was considering more formalizing where its local government should fit in overall pay scales for comparative BC local governments, and settled on the notion that it would like to see the town positioned at the midpoint of the pay scale. So while it's not an element of the new collective agreement, over the same period, efforts will be made to shift slowly but surely the Gibson's pay scale to market midpoint. So of course, collective agreement increases like those, and that plan shift is quite a demand. So the combined municipal tax costs, now those figures actually include everything faced for 25 to 28 that we know of right now. So increases for the senior staff and so on. You change the benefits package under your collective agreement, the senior staff end up getting the same things. So all of that has been priced in there. So, you know, that's quite a starting point before any hoped for new revenues. And then on top of that, while it's not something that hasn't been planned, on the bottom is something that's pretty big from the town's perspective. So its population is expected to be over 5,000 in the 2026 census. So therefore, it will have to contract directly for RCMP services. It will pay a much greater share. And it's a constant estimation game, but right now it's equivalent to a 23% increase in municipal taxes. But council has made sure, this council, previous council, to get started. So the town has already increased taxes by 15% towards this, and it's banking those monies on the side so that when it's more certain exactly what it is we're supposed to raise and pay for, we'll use the bank money to smooth things and do the final adjustments on the municipal taxes. So those are two things this year, and at this point, the town is just staying at the 15% level until it has more information. Budget challenges and opportunities. Okay, well, paying for infrastructure projects, there's a headache. In terms of new assets, the town is almost at the end of a project to update its DCC rates. So council has seen preliminary ones, and there's been public consultation, at least with developers and builders and interested parties. So at some point in 2025, that will be finalized. It's always difficult. All I can say from the public information that's been out there for you is the increases are quite high, and they look similar to all the other DCC rates that have been published in the Lower Mainland over the last year or so. Yeah. In terms of asset renewal, the things we already have, the the town is not escalating its utility rates and parcel taxes at 10% a year, but it is aware that really the only way to get the amount that's being paid every year, a fully costed charge to the consumer, the rates and taxes need to accelerate much higher from where they are. So roughly speaking, after the huge cost escalations, most people who were already increasing rates a lot before are now looking at realistically seeing combined increases of about the 10% level for maybe 5 years. And it's like this RCMP story too. It's you work your way along and see how you're doing. So it's not about raising rates at 10% a year forever. It's just there's a number of big catch-up years. And a quick reminder on that, how did we all get here? Well, because rates are being and taxes are being priced to pay for operations, shares of new assets, the rest paid by grant or debt, and not a whole lot focused on renewal. And over the last 20 years and the last 10 years for sure, there's been an increasing focus and a push from the senior governments for local governments to get a handle on that. And I see so many local governments are, and I know it's tough, but that is a realistic number. So that's the challenge. The opportunity, which often seems to get lost, is the municipal tax revenue growth side. So I'm not sure the town actively intended to have any particular target, but with all the efforts to increase all kinds of housing, there's the old-fashioned way of growing tax revenue was to get new construction happening and grow your tax roll, providing you had DCC money coming in. So right now, the town has 1,200 housing units in its development pipeline. So that's everything from the application just arrived and it's at the very start of the process to things that are very far advanced, but they haven't actually started building. Who's to say how many of these will actually come out of the pipeline and be built? But I mean, the town has 26 2,600 property folios roughly. So you can imagine if people are developing 1,200 housing units, that could be quite a change. I mean, in the happy outcome land, it would be the town's property tax value, the roll, would go up something like 20% if all of this came out of the pipeline, and that would be a lot of extra money to share the burden with, as long as the DCC money for the new infrastructure was there so you can get court that way. So yeah, hopefully we'll see a lot more housing units coming online in Houston. Sorry. Former port of call, Gibson's. Oops, sorry. Let forward. So regional option steps, and just sharing things that many of you are aware of. The Aquifer 560 watershed agreement, as I understand it and what I've read, was intended to care for and share a water asset. The town has been working hard on things that it saw as its obligation under this. So the monitoring program is installed, which means, I mean, the planning, the technology, the actual implementation of monitoring stations and stuff is pretty much done. And there is a study that's almost ready, which shows how you would use the capacity of that aquifer in an optimized regional system. So just letting you all know it's there. Regional steps. Well, the landfill waste reduction one is really a big one, and the town is aware that there's still a huge amount of recycling that's going into the landfill, and not pointing out at any particular local government body. It's from everybody. The need for ongoing improvements is really important, and one way of doing that that I have seen with at least one other regional district is not to shift all of the landfill costs into a tipping fee, but to look at it and see how much you could leave as a base charge that goes out to the tax requisitions to the local governments and how much could be in tipping fees. So you're like water metering. you're really starting to incentivize people slowly but surely through financial levers to head to the behavior that everyone wants on the coast. Excellent. Innovation best practices. Well, you may have heard of this one. I mean, we have some staff members at the town who are advanced in terms of their thinking, their willingness to consider new ways of doing things. So BC provided a grant of a little more than $200,000 for the town to work with a specialist, almost academic style developer, but very knowledgeable in software development, to develop a first IT application. So in the end, there's likely to be AI aspects to that application, and it will be considering, this is getting really technical, but considering data on a three-dimensional level. So we're not just talking about a 3D picture coming back to us afterwards. We're talking about something quite sophisticated that way. And a typical item would be you could use this, so you put all of the immense amounts of information that you have on your local government into this, and you would test your local government's climate change resiliency under different temperature increases to see what is going to happen to yours. And one of the intended, or a key intended output of this application will be a single risk index value. So think of it as an insurance rating for your local government. So it could be on climate, it could be on earthquake preparedness, it could be on wildfire preparedness. I can share that FCM and the funders they primarily rely on to fund our debt are now at the point where they're wanting the questionnaires that help them assess our individual and joint risks. But you can see where they're heading. They want to head to the insurance world, and eventually they will expect us to have a rating. So that's a big innovation that's going on at the town. Oh, and this application, when it's finished, will be suitable for all local governments to use, which is why BC funded the first prototype. Natural assets engineered infrastructure. This, in terms of best practice, there's lots of great engineering that goes on for infrastructure, and it seems like natural assets has been discussed for a long time. I'm seeing, but it's still, because I've had local government colleagues contact me since I've been at Gibson's to ask about stuff. It's clear it's still pretty early stage for adoption, a lot of places. And what's really, while I've seen a number of projects involving natural assets that intended or accidentally benefited from them but didn't plan them, I think this one is a great one. Many of you might be familiar with it. So White Tower Park stormwater ponds, not very exciting. There's the picture in terms of, like, it's not complex. There's not a lot to see, just nature. But to do that cost $1.5 million, and it avoided having to install basically a new storm drainage line, dig up the road, put the line in. That was coming up almost at the top of the list in the next DCC new infrastructure project. So the upfront saving from doing it this way and spending 1.5 was $5 to $7 million. It's going to need almost no annual maintenance. Stormwater systems need annual maintenance. You've got to make sure that the drains aren't plugged, and you have to be suspicious that they're not getting plugged up inside where you can't see. And the other thing is they will eventually wear out, and this won't. So instead of scrambling for another $10 million or whatever the number is, 50, 60, 70 years down the road, it'll still be there. But the key on it is all staff have to be encouraged to take that in mind and to remind the engineering consultant firms that we work with to just have a look. I mean, sometimes there is no natural asset angle, but if it is, that's a lot of money to save. Lastly, we were asked to comment on our public engagement, well, every local government is different. What I've learned at Gibson's works, and I've been involved in a lot of public engagement where almost nobody showed up after a lot of effort, is there's a single community dialogue. I mean, we have all the standard meetings and people can see the agenda and the materials, they can attend, they can watch. But this is one where I would say close to 50 people appeared, and we were there for 3 hours, and we could have stayed another hour if we'd had the facility until 10 at night. And anyway, this is what we heard from them. Transport up top, traffic speed limits, crossings, traffic calming measures. We explained that there's a master transportation plan coming and that they're wanting such a thorough look across the whole town that that would be the best place to do it. Anyway, I won't, they're up there to see. The prior years, the town isn't able to respond to all of these, but for example, the 24 ones, I'd say about a third of them were clearly finished. More than a third were substantially in progress. And then there are others like the new dog park still needed that like, well, hadn't got there yet. There's some things it's just hard to do. And that's the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Yeah, that event that we just had a photo of was just 2 nights ago. So lots of work has gone into this presentation over the last week, especially, and kind of collecting all those things together. That it's very recent information that we're bringing together. I saw Donna first, and I'll go to Darren.
Yeah, so just following that train of thought, what do you feel, and certainly I heard the comment that, you know, you can be successful at these or not. You know, we have 2 people show up versus what happened. What do you think what were your success factors?
We really put it out there that, like, in the past, I think when you use the word, quite honestly, when you use the word budget, or it doesn't really excite people. But we frame it this way too. Like, we legitimately frame these events to say, what are your priorities? It's so sometimes people. And we do get emails connected to it too, and I'll give you one example. Somebody said our priority should be getting more doctors for the Sunshine Coast, and I'm good with that, even though it's not in the provincial budget. I just think, you know, it really welcomes a lot of people, and can attract more engagement when you generally say, what are your priorities? What do you think our needs are? What should we be focusing on? Rather than really, you know, we did definitely presented the details of the budget. William did a great job of that, and made the kind of parameters of what municipal services are very clear. But at the same time, we try to open it up to everyone and their vision of the community and what they see with their priorities. And I think that's been helpful in having a conversation that way, even if we're talking about things that aren't going to be directly in the next budget. That's one factor for sure. We've built it up over a few years too, so it's kind of, yeah. It used to be 5 or 4 people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I saw Darren first, and then go to Kelly.
Yeah. The stormwater management system that you put in, that's good to see. In Sechelt, we have the marsh system, which does something like that. It's more natural, but it's good to see that you did that. Where is that located, and does it take in a number of the sort of the streams that goes from upper? I'm assuming it's in lower, maybe it's in upper, I could be corrected, but I'm assuming it's taking in a lot of the stream systems, culverts, some larger culverts, and some larger ditches in order to deal with stormwater in those cases that we're getting near atmospheric rivers to fill it up. So I'd love to go look at it. So
yeah. No, it's really easy to look at. It's right beside the pool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where it is.
Yeah, it's right behind the pool.
So it's Upper Gibson's, it's the water system.
Yeah, and he's going to hate me for this, but I'm going to put our CAO on the spot to talk more about the. He's trying to hide over. He was trying to hide in the back earlier too. But.
The water that comes to that pond, you could think of it as all the water that doesn't go into Shasta Creek or Gibson's Creek, sort of in and behind the the mall, and so that sort of to the top of the toe of the hill, I guess. That center, and it's really to slow down the discharge into the creek and avoid downstream impacts, which we used to have pretty regularly beforehand. And we want to recognize as well that that pond is adjoined by ponds that were built in the past. There was some leadership in the community on that front. But it wasn't even recognized on our lists of infrastructure, but was clearly doing a lot of the heavy work, and we just expanded that, and it has a lot of capacity for these events. So it's been nice to have.
Director Bax.
Yeah, I noticed that Mr. Wallace talked on solid waste earlier, and I have a question as to how the staff at the town of Gibson's works with our infrastructure staff in our solid waste department when it comes to this type of initiatives to try to reduce waste. And is there any opportunities for them to find synergies?
There are.
And a follow-up question about where is Five Corners?
Five Corners? You live on the Sunshine Coast? Molly's Reach. Yeah, and where that's right where Stafford's new restaurant's right in the middle of it. Yeah, the station. Yeah. There's actually it's a subject of constant debate in Gibson's whether there are 5 corners or there are actually 6, or even 7, if you count the Grandma's parking lot where people back out onto the street. So we're going to have that debate at council one day and make it official, I think. I'm seeing lots of questions now, but you got them going on the 5 corners. I think that's one of the 5. Molly's Lane is one of the 5, I think. I was going to answer I think the first one, I mean, well, as you know, William's been here relatively recently, so that history of working together as local governments on solid waste, I mean, it kind of comes when we, it does come to the fore for the municipalities when we talk about, when we're trying to work out our organics collection, for example, and a garbage collection. But as far as potential goes, I mean, there's huge potential in terms of, I mean, looking at the Gibson's recycling depot and the green waste site and like those services we use and perhaps trying to look at consolidating some of them and things like that. I mean, it's something that we definitely need to look at, and the same goes for services in Sechelt. Like we need to work together on those kinds of opportunities. I don't know if Manny can elaborate on that for his history. I saw your hand up too, William, but I'll go to Manny first.
Certainly. What I would add to that list is the area of education. I think that's probably something we could benefit from, especially with our challenge with future discussions around the landfill site. How do we should all, communicate equally to our coastwide. At contract award is another time that we check in with each other, sort of we're sharing information and documents and timelines, and scope of work is a little bit specific to each area, but otherwise, and then there's the PTAC work as well, although somewhat limited on that. So
I just wanted to add that the regional district made an award for waste collection in 2024, and that RFP was shared over to the town, and we revised it to fit the town and put it out there. But we did things like matching the terms and option periods so we could get that more in sync. And that was because we heard both from the current waste contractors and also from a member of the of the regional district staff that it would be helpful if we did have those things aligned. It would be easier to make changes, update items. Thank you.
And I saw I think Director Gabius had your hand up and Director Toth.
Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd.
Curious about the innovations that you're starting or have started with AI and 3D. So is the goal of this ultimately to test it with a number of municipalities and local governments, and then hopefully spread it out to all the other local governments? Is this the intent?
Now, there's been recent interest in that, actually, that our CAO's reported to me, and I think I'd better defer to him again to answer in more detail.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. The model, we got funding to create the model, and subsequently we got a separate funding to run the model, because one of the challenges that we realized is all the risk is, for obvious reasons, a big piece of work that there are requirements for additional risk assessments. We've seen that with the Emergency Disaster Management Act update, climate change plans that require, and even our own emergency plan work that was referenced earlier. I think there was a question about the status of that. Our development permit guidelines, there's all of these risks, and there's a lot of similarities, so we didn't want to do 5 reports on risk that weren't particularly interconnected. So the model is to help us to do the assessments for those upcoming risk requirements, updates. But also we want to use the model to model council's policies to assist with council's decision making, because the decision on climate is not as simple as where to put trees and solar panels. It's a lot more complex, and we, with limited resources, have to have a more sophisticated way to determine the priorities on where we're going to invest and what to do first and what to focus on. We'll be able to do that. The resilience rating that we're talking about is, we all have it on our smartphones, and it's sort of what is our combined ability to recover from a disturbance. And at the moment, we are already rated somewhat financially. Our fire department's performance, it's based on it leads to a rating for our communities. It's just a more complex way that sees the community as one single interconnected system, which is it is. And so the recent interest we had recently is from the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions. We're doing a pilot on climate for the government, and we're going to test that out. We're hoping to have a working model by the end of this year. And then the actual modeling processes, then the province is interested in making that available for other communities. So that there's no sense of getting a rating of Gibson's if we don't understand our own context and regional and provincial. And if you want to compare just from the decision-making perspective, try to have a tool that can provide a picture that's province-wide. So it's a bit on that.
Thank you, Councillor, Director, Chair Toth.
Thank you. I wanted to come back to the garbage conversation, and as Gibson's is talking about diversion and other opportunities, I heard in the presentation, some component of tipping fees. I'm wondering if Gibson's is looking at or has looked at or is contemplating moving towards a pay-as-you-throw model when it comes to garbage collection specifically. We talk about all these diversions and incentives and, free green waste, things like that to encourage people to divert. But if we can get people to move towards paying for what they actually have to throw away, I think we're going to see a lot more behavioral change. Just wondering if Gibson's has considered that.
We'd love to do it. It was, we had a zero waste select committee that I was on like 8 years ago or something. And that was one of the main recommendations from our Town of Gibson's committee. I know more recently I inquired with AJM about whether they have the infrastructure and their trucks to have like scales. They have worked with some in another jurisdiction, I think, but only for commercial and wouldn't be able to do it for residential, I learned. But I mean, we're hoping, again, like just trying to keep on top of technology, as technology improves and becomes more available to smaller communities, maybe, I mean, I think regionally it'd be a brilliant thing for us all to look at and try to maybe leverage to get that kind of service here, if that's what we're looking for. I mean, we could put it a RFP saying that's exactly what we want, and whoever applies for it would have to fulfill that. But I'd like to go to William on this too, because I think that's part of what you were talking about too, in terms of transferring it more to a kind of a pay-as-you-throw model to incentivize people to
Yes, but
consume less.
It would be more indirect. So thinking of the landfill, everybody we'll assume there has to be another landfill in this region. Everyone needs to contribute to it in order for it to be there. So that's the notion of there has to be some base level of fixed amount you pay, whether you're almost zero waste or you're still quite wasteful. But that would still flow through in the normal calculations. It's about the next because there's so many different kinds of costs at the landfills. It's about taking essentially all the operating costs as much as you can and figuring out what to charge in tipping costs when those trucks arrive. It's so many tons in, and they charge it. It would still, because right now, for example, Gibson's, we get a separate bill for every time our contractor arrives at the landfill for so many tons. So we would reflect it there. If the town people were doing a brilliant job and there was hardly anything showing up, well, there wouldn't be much billed, because, and it would be really beneficial because we would have made sure that they're not contributing if they're not actually delivering waste there. So it's an indirect way, but it does work. I mean, people can see it in their rates, and it's really the only way to keep pushing the costs over to those who are definitely contributing the most waste. Hope that helps.
I think I just wanted to comment too, I think it just makes me think with our popular depot model in the Gibsons area of people going to the depot, I think there's a lot of people in the Gibsons area who I've heard from them that would love to be able to, and I think this was even offered at the Gibsons Recycling Depot years ago. You could just throw your one bag of garbage that you've collected over the month if you're really you don't consume a lot, and pay a couple bucks for it or something, and then throw it into a container, and that would be your pay-as-you-throw model. But then the other side for government challenge with that is that you still need a critical mass to do your curbside collection. So it's something we need to keep looking at and thinking about, I think. Is this a new question? Because I've got Councillor Shepherd for a new question as well. Or is this related to? Okay, yeah, Councillor Shepherd.
Just to sort of go back to that painful issue of the RCMP, I'm just wondering if there's any silver lining to what Town of Gibson's facing. Would that, once you cross that threshold, would there be more RCMP hired for the Sunshine Coast, or what's the effect of it? Thanks.
This is a really familiar question because, yeah, I had the residents asking me this 2 nights ago. Yeah, and it was interesting because I was saying, well, the great news is now we can do like the District of Sechelt and be looking at like $250,000 per member charge that we can choose to pay for, which we can't do that right now. But now we can, if we want to, we can say, yeah, we're going to hire more. But yeah, how do we afford that? I have no idea. But no, the more direct answer is there's no automatic increase. I do think there, as William was saying, a lot of things need to be closer to the time. There's a lot of factors and variables still that the RCMP will be throwing at us, and I think they'll be looking at recommended service levels and things like this. But we've been warned by other communities that have had to do this recently that we can't expect any increase in service, or especially to Gibsons. It'll probably be. And then another resident came up to me after the presentation and said, well, we should just have our own police service. And that's an option. That is an option that our select committee looked at a few years ago. But yeah, far more expensive than just continuing to opt into the RCMP. Yeah.
Just back to a little around this predictive resilience model. I think I'm not a high-tech person, so I'm not even going to, I'll just say, Donna, don't go there. But it's tremendous in terms of the opportunity there. And as we look forward, I guess the thing that really signals for me is the whole thing around insurance. And as we look at these increases in insurance and how more difficulty to get insurance, et cetera, I think it's great that you're looking at that project, and fantastic on that. My question was, or comment was, have you, for funding, talked to Pacifican at all? For possible funding opportunities?
Yeah, I thought you'd be aware of that. I mean, I know, I recall with CAO Machado talking to MP Weiler about federal opportunities, so pretty sure that's one of the opportunities he would have identified.
Yeah, because they are looking at AI initiatives right now, so it might be just something that might be quite new. Let me look into that. It's a possibility. And I just have one other question around the whole landfill and recycling. When we went to the climate change workshop or whatever forum at the Gibsons Market, I know that Salish Soil were there, and they talked a lot about what they're doing in Gibsons. Is that part of a system now that's really working for you in terms of something you've put new in place? I know that they talked about possibly putting this into Sechelt and talking to Sechelt about it. So I don't know enough about it, but it had to do with recycling and composting, that type of thing.
The organics collection?
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll go to CAO Machado.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of the pieces of the differentiate job program, and that's it's the diversion rate to start with, and the relatively low contamination rate. Having the smaller bins, and we had a very intense sort of education program at the beginning, including sort of looking through the very first few weeks, we looked through every bag to try and get a really good sense of what was in there, and then communicated back to the community what we would prefer not to see there. And so 5-6 years into it now, the contamination rate continues to be very low, and we're very thankful for the users' participation and their behavior. The diversion rate is what William was talking about, sort of a total amount per person, which is related but separate from the total amount of waste that we send out. Or sort of our reduction is in the neighborhood of 35 to 45%, give or take a few numbers. So those are the types of things that have made the process successful, and being designed from the kitchen counter to a compost product, as opposed to having a hauling process and sort of a landfill disposal process, which more traditional contracts would have.
So something that you suggest that might be worth looking at for us in Sechelt in terms of a possibility.
I think it's very important to compost and to remove as much diversion, to divert as much as possible from the landfill for all the reasons we know. And but that's not just a question of not sending it there, it's what we're doing with that product. And if we can add value locally to create that soil from a carbon perspective as well, is tremendous benefits. And if we were to compost all the garbage that goes into the landfill, and in a few years we could make a significant difference in our collective ability to store carbon in our soil. So it's a very good opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Looks good.
I'd love to hear what the staff want to ask each other, but I think they're probably more comfortable having those conversations in a different forum.
Without us around. All right, so we're going to switch to the District of Sechelt now. Dave Douglas, we're not going to take a break. We're just going to roll straight into the next presentation. Donna, if I can get you to shut your microphone off there. Thank you. I do see one question that's posted in the Zoom Q&A. We'll get to questions from the public after the third presentation is done. And so, yeah, if you've got any other questions along the way and you don't want to remember them or ask them verbally, you are welcome to throw them in the Q&A. And then otherwise, next up is the District of Sechelt presentation.
Okay, thank you. So, it's funny sitting here just listening to what everybody does, and all the governments do something just a little bit different, whether it's regard to reaching to the public and other things. So we start our budget process off really with an online questionnaire, and we ran it 1 year in the summer and didn't get a lot of people biting. And so we've changed that now that we do it in September, and I think we had our highest number this year. It's 200 people, but once again, it just asks 10 simple questions or 12 simple questions and gives us kind of an idea of what the community is seeing as priorities. And we take the results of that to the committee of the whole. After that, well, during that time, we meet with community associations, so maybe a little bit different than Gibson's a little bit. We have 7 different community associations, and they range from Davis Bay to Porpoise Bay East and West Sechelt, the downtown area. And so we meet with each of them and we ask them kind of for their 3 highest priorities with whether it's projects or operating, meaning, maintenance of something in their area. And so we bring that also back to the committee of the whole and discuss that. Some of the things actually really don't need council's decision. If we find out that we're not maintaining an area town to say an expected standard, then we'll just ship it right off to operations and get them going on it. So that's the benefit we see there. So meanwhile, that's going on. The staff are working on completing the provisional budget and preparing presentations for council. Our first budget meeting was December 18th, and we'll continue our deliberations in January. We have a bit of a workshop next week, and then the week following we have another budget meeting. And of course, our budgets don't need to be adopted until May 15th, so we have a little more time to work on it. However, we're vowing to get this done earlier and earlier each year. So we'd like to be most of the way through it in December. We haven't quite got there yet. We we were implementing a budget software this year, so it's caused us a little bit of time, and hopefully next year it won't. So things that we've been focusing on, we're going to try and we're aiming to maintain a similar level of service to 2024. Like other governments I've heard, we're trying to create an achievable capital plan. Then becomes a little bit, when there's a lot of grant opportunities out there, that's when you almost divert from that. But there hasn't been a lot of grant opportunities at this point this year. So, we're really trying to achieve, create an achievable capital plan. Over the last 6 or 7 years, we've been doing a cumulative 3% tax increase for capital contributions. So I would say in 2017 or 18, we had very little money to go towards capital on an annual basis. And, just with, the onset of, renewals and the infrastructure deficit, we started doing this 3% cumulative. And for us, 3% is about $400,000. So, this year we're about $2.4 million that we'll have annually for capital, which can either help match grants, or we use it just for infrastructure renewal. And our plans are to continue this for a number of more years. Solid waste this year, we do have 3 streams pick up. So we have organics, garbage, and recycle. And we're not recommending a fee increase this year. It'll be the first time in a couple of years. So we're at $303 for the three types of garbage, and we're not anticipating an increase. A couple of reasons for that. One, Recycle BC has come forward with a new agreement that will pay us more for the recycle that we put into the recycle. And we're starting to get a better handle on our volumes with regards to organics, because that was a new one for us, and how much it took out of the garbage stream. And then the other focus for us has been community safety. We had 2 public sessions on community safety, had pretty good turnouts to both. Certainly the first one was the bigger. The people that came, we had over 200 people come to the first session, and the second one probably just over 100. And but very good, lots of concern there. So, we need to look at that as a community focus for 2025. So this is going back to the one comment that I made about we meet with our community associations, and they come to us. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 community associations that we meet with. They give us a list, and this is what we present to council, the things that, either need to be considered at the council level, things that are going to cost, taxpayer money, and then we prioritize these in with our operational and capital asks. We have this process that we call additional operating requests, and this could be addition of a staff member, and that would be a multi-year ask, or it could be for some kind of a hire a contractor to do a plan for something. And so this process for us, it can be substantive because, we have a base budget that, is fairly static until we do ask for different things. And so this year we presented this to council in what we call our bubble diagrams, and kind of shows, you'll see there's numbers on here. So council had a sheet that reflected what number 5 or 37 was. But you can see most of it's being funded from taxation. And if it's not taxation, it's sewer user fees, so it's highly volatile to tax or user fee increases. So additionally, we feed council the information as it reflects their strategic plan. so that, you know, all of these projects here are now filtered into the strategic planning process, because it's, you know, important that we're not, staff are not going this way when council's trying to go this way. And so we present this to council so they know we're all heading in the same direction. And then we also put it into 3 categories like the SRD, but our category is a little different. So we have critical, important, and strategic. 2025 capital, once again, we presented it in bubble diagram format. You can see that the majority of the funding would come from that 3% cumulative or capital reserve. And, you know, there's a significant number of projects. And, you know, this is along the achievable lines, things that we need to get moving on. We also provide council with a list in department by department. And we also provide it how it relates to the strategic plan, council strategic plan. So once again, we're all heading in the same direction. And then finally, we show further analysis as to whether the capital is critical, important, or strategic. So this year, we're recommending to council $5.9 million in capital, and that's probably the lowest ask we've had in, I don't know how many years. I've been there 5 years, so more than 5 years. You know, so we're trying our best to do, you know, what is achievable. So we have had the one meeting in council with regards to our budget. A little bit like the town of Gibson's, we know that, you know, we can't, their numbers here are fairly high. We realize that. We know it can't continue forever. Council has not decided on these numbers. This is kind of where we're starting. So we're, you know, 6 to 7% in operations. Then council's decided the 3% to continue for capital contribution. Our sewer operations, about a 4% increase, and septage fee increase of 6%. And even though that 6% is still not, it's not sustainable. Like, it's under what we really need for septage. And I think, so yeah, so we have a workshop on January 15th, and we have a special committee of the whole budget meeting on January 22nd. And I think that's it. For more information, we have District of Sechelt website for those online, and just go under 2025 budget. That's all I had.
Okay, so I guess we'll follow the routine led by Mayor White, and I'll entertain questions. Maybe just before that, you know, I think we've got to recognize the other side of this, and I know I've shared with some folks, there's some real effort in other governments in Canada to reduce their spending, recognizing that in doing so, that might oblige us to reduce services. And it's certainly, many of us are aware of businesses that are closing, and people are struggling. So I don't want us to lose sight in our budgeting process, but I think across the coast that maybe this is not a time to be entertaining even the important to have. We may have to make some very tough decisions. So, you know, it's not something to relish, but, you know, the idea of, well, even something like the 3% that we're very proud of that we've started, but when I look at it, we know it's not enough. You know, when you look at what our operating costs, or sorry, our capital costs are coming in on projects, we're not maintaining our ability to fund the replacement of our infrastructure. So not to be a purveyor of doom and gloom, but this is, I think, for me, this is the main thing we got elected for, all of us. And this is a tough decision. I haven't shared with council, but I will be proposing that we actually increase the 3% this year. I think that that's absolute mandatory requirement for us to make sure we get even more money to provide the ability to maintain our infrastructure. But at the same time, I'm not happy with 6 or 7%, because I worry about affordability for our taxpayers. So I could go on and on and on about this subject, but we're here more for questions from all of you. So Mayor White.
Sure, I saw I should acknowledge too, when I saw your CFO, Douglas, come up, I realized some of the questions that were asked earlier I could have directed to him, because he was the one who was very instrumental in starting up our organics collection service when he was at the town of Gibson's. But so, and some of those questions were from the district of Sechelt, interestingly. But yeah, you could talk to him about implementing something similar.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah. I saw the phrase affordable housing coordinator flash by. It's $60,000. Is that in reference to the regional coordinator that MRDT funds are paying for, or is that something internal to the district of Sechelt?
No, that was a shared.
Okay.
It's the shared.
Yeah. Just.
It was an ask that came to us from the Affordable Housing Committee or Association. Yeah. I believe they've come to all the governments.
Right. By the way, I should also add, we've got Mr. Allen, our acting CAO, with us today. Mr. Yates is away this week. And for those who haven't, I'm sure everybody's met Megan, but our new Director of Engineering recently promoted into the position, and who decided to get sick over Christmas and came back to work to get healthy. Mr. Bax.
Yes, I noticed that you've got a line in your budget for a air curtain burner. And are you receiving a grant to get that, or is that going to be part of your taxation? And can you tell me how we can use it on our invasive plants?
Yeah, money.
Yeah, great question. It is based on getting a grant. And so, if we all wanted to use it, I'm not sure how big this one is. It's only what, $70,000, I think, 75,000. So it's not going to be huge, but it can handle so much a year. So if it's available, then somehow we can work out something that would work for the government from a cost perspective.
Director McMahon.
Yes, I'm acutely aware of a lot of capital projects that are lurking out there for the regional districts, such as landfill 2.0 and fire flow, like replacing a lot of our water mains. Do we have like a joint list of all of the big projects that are looming? Because you mentioned the septage facility. That's another one that's coming at us, and it's critical to the rural areas because we're the big users of it.
Yes,
so,
yes.
yeah, but do we have this joint, like the doomsday list?
I'm not so sure we do, but it's something we should definitely work on. Yep, for sure.
And I think looking around too, some of that, because I agree with you on the water mains, for example, that's the SCRD provides that service to all of us. So got a doomsday list? We'll leave that one hanging. But yes, I think it's really important. The whole infrastructure, everything we have is aging, like all of us, and it's getting more and more expensive. We've had projects come in, I think, 50% over budget. What was RFP within 2 years, the costs are coming in that much higher. So we can't ignore it. You can't ask a question.
I can't.
Actually,
it's on the line of what Donna just brought up, and the septic was one that is a big concern, I think, for us. And I don't know how much of that information has been shared, but certainly from a timing perspective, we're getting fairly close to making some big decisions on that. Would you be able to just give an overview of that for us?
Yeah, we currently are on BC land lease where the current septic facility is, and it runs out in 2031. And so we have many options there. When we can apply for a longer tenure, we can look at our options around different facilities. And I'm sure an option that council will have to consider is whether we continue in that business. So,
Yeah, please.
For reasons that aren't clear to me, I believe that facility was originally the SCRD's and then Seashell took it over. Why did you want it?
great question. I wasn't there at the time, so I can't answer that, but.
No, I mean, that was part of our wastewater treatment system. I don't think it was SCRD initially. Upper Dusty Road, because we had to split the two to add capacity to our wastewater treatment system in the late 90s. The site selected happened to be halfway up Dusty Road. And so it was actually a fully functioning wastewater treatment facility until the Water Resource Center came in and could handle it all. So that's when we converted to essentially handling solids and taking some of the high nutrient products from septic fields and so on. Councillor Shepherd.
I've just got a general, it's not a question, it's something I struggle with as a counselor. And I think this applies to all of the governments. We're taxing for a certain level of service. And what our struggle with is, I don't know how to frame the question, what happens if we look at not maintaining, but lowering the level of service in order to contain the tax increase? So I don't know if other governments have dealt with that on specific issues, or if it's something that that governments should look at going forward.
I can offer that there are certainly other governments this cycle that are looking at how do they challenge what is an acceptable level of service. You know, that it's easy enough to say don't increase taxes. That's simple to say, but the implementation involves those tough decisions. And certainly I think some of the Capital Regional District is being publicly challenged to do more on that in that sort of assessment. The other one, I'd be remiss if I didn't flag, you know, we're spending a lot of money on costs that aren't ours. It's called downloading. And it's all well and good. I think we're all happy to provide the service for community safety or a whole lot of other costs. But at some point, we got to get paid for it. And I think it behooves all of us as a start to start measuring very rigorously what we're actually incurring in providing those services. Because I think we have some invoices that need to be prepared and delivered to the province and potentially the feds to pay for the services, their services that we're providing. So there. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you. I think it's great that we're having this meeting and talking about the things we each individually want to do in our jurisdictions, but also some of our shared responsibilities. I really like the resiliency, sustainability issues, and I realize that Gibson's has great leadership in this, and I would like to be able to, I know they're busy, but share that and do regional projects together on that instead of just having Gibson's make these great contributions on their own. But I think it's one environment, several watersheds, but the environment doesn't know our political boundaries. One thing we had in our previous capital plan was a community services plan. So we're talking about levels of service. We haven't got around to actually starting that plan, but I think looking in the long term about levels of service will help us jointly, even as the entire RD, will help us determine what our infrastructure priority should be in terms of even in terms of perhaps one day having a fire department, or having a better police department, or having just better quality services, that we can set our own priorities together. So I think anything we can do together, we should do together, and we should avoid duplication. I think that's one of the criticisms I've heard being on council, is that, you know, most residents don't really care that much what jurisdiction it is, but they do want to have kind of a seamless administration, that they feel that we're serving them well and efficiently. So maybe there's some money to be saved regarding staffing. That's probably something that the residents would like. And in terms of downloading, yes, there is some downloading, but some of the conferences I've gone to that says, you know, they say, well, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Decide what your services are. Don't just get wrapped up in this post-COVID whatever is going on. Just decide what you want to do, and then don't do some of the things perhaps that we have kind of with great hearts started doing. Thanks.
Thanks. I saw Silas or Donna?
Yeah, in answer to that, I want to acknowledge that the SCRD board has passed a couple of motions to engage the town more in a couple things, natural assets approach, and looking at that regionally, and talking more about the Watershed 560 agreement. I know there's a motion on the books to kind of have a workshop on that, and I'm hoping those initiatives will happen soon. And I mean, as our CFO reported, the Watershed 560 agreement's moving along, so maybe it'll make sense to have that discussion when it kind of comes, a lot of the data is collected and we have more to talk about there.
Data. Director McMahon, did you have something? El?
I just wanted to follow up on levels of service, because that's, and maybe our CFO might want to comment on that, but we have a lot of services, and in some cases there is a clear established level, like transit. And you know if you're meeting it because the bus comes. But in a lot of our services, we do not have an established level of service. So until you express your service levels in a measurable way, then you're in a very difficult position to adjust them. And we're still struggling with that, which is creating the levels of service for a lot of our departments. I don't know how the municipalities are doing.
No, I think it's a really important thing, and I know in many parts of our world, particularly the business world, we track that with things like timesheets and customer satisfaction that say, hey, you didn't install my heat pump, like you said, so I'm not going to pay you. So there's many ways of measuring it, but I think that measurement, I said somewhat flippantly, but data is vital to make sure that we know whether we're improving or slipping, and so we need to come up ways. We're hearing the word about productivity and how things are different in between the Canadian economy and the U.S. economy and in productivity, and it behooves us again to be ready to demonstrate that we're delivering value for our money. Mayor White.
I'm going to poke a hornet's nest here and say, because whenever I say this, I get pushback from certain people in the community. But one example I've seen over the years is roads in the town of Gibsons. Anyway, it's like when I remember in my very first year as a councillor, we looked at the cost of what it's going to take to maintain roads, and it was massive then. I'm sure it's double now. And we have not been able to sustain that into our budget. It doesn't matter what the year is. It's been how many years now? Yeah, and we're having to look at like very minor kind of ways of maintaining our roads. And there are complaints in our community about the roads not being maintained to certain people's standards. And when I do have the opportunity to travel to other communities, and I went down to Washington State, I think recently, and kind of noticed that roads aren't perfect anywhere else in the world. We seem to have a superficial level of standards here in some cases, and potholes exist everywhere. And I think people it's kind of a first world problem, and honestly, is wanting perfect roads everywhere that have brand new pristine pavement. So I want to acknowledge that as an example of something I think we've probably all, as local governments, seen, and whether it's having to deal with the provincial government and hearing those complaints about roads if you're in the SCRD. But I think as citizens, we've all had to get used to different standards than maybe we saw in the past in that service.
You remind me, last year I was lucky enough to go to Newfoundland for a short vacation, and they dealt with their potholes in a different way. They put a sign up saying, "Beware of the potholes." In the pothole? Yeah, pretty much. Councillor, Chair, yes, like you said, Director Toth.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that even beyond the money side of maintaining services, at least with the regional district, there's a lot of struggle around maintaining the staffing required to do the work that needs to be done. I can't see, yeah, I can see her. Our ports position, for example, is responsible for a lot of work and a lot of planning and a lot of general maintenance oversight. And the position's vacant. If you've got a department of 10 and 2 people are gone, you're still at 80%. But if you've got a department of 1 and that person's gone, work is difficult to keep moving forward. So, it's interesting because there's a question here from the public about rec facilities and expansion of the facilities. And, when we talk about service levels, yeah, there's the capital, there's the operating, but there's also, the people to do the work. And right now, I know at least in recreation, we've got a lifeguard shortage. So even if we had a bigger facility or more facilities, do we have could we even have lifeguards to staff it? And I don't know if Gibson's has staffing issues that, impact service levels, but certainly it is a struggle for the regional district.
When I was with the YMCA, that was becoming a major issue over time. We'd started to see the decrease more and more in trying to find lifeguards. And it's one of the most expensive parts of a recreation facility to run, to maintain, and also certainly to staff. So it has become a real problem, and it's continuing to be a problem. I think the last comment my CEO said was, let's just pave it and make it whatever parking lot. Exactly. I mean, that's kind of where, and obviously he was doing that in jest, but it has become a real concern. I'm not sure why, whether it's a cost issue, they're not making enough money, I'm not sure. But it's a real problem.
I think it's almost time to pass it back to the chair, but go ahead if it's about Seashell.
Yeah, I'll just say I think our equivalent to lifeguards is wastewater treatment professionals, and I'll use this opportunity to say we've got an opening right now, and if anyone wants, I think it's still open. I expect it is, because the last one we had. Yeah.
Well, hands off. On that note, over to you, Chair Toth.
All right, thank you. That's the end of the District of Seashell portion of it. Thank you, Director Douglas. Now, Silas, you had talked about us trying to have some conversation about higher level intergovernmental. Do we want to do that now, or do we want to take a couple questions from the public and then do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the questions from the public at this point would be
sure,
probably to everybody in some ways, but yeah, Adam already started off by asking kind of a big picture question. Any of our CFO, I'd love to see all of our CFOs kind of do a panel even, but maybe that's a different event.
Yeah, so we do have one question online here from Susan that says that our recreational facilities are getting more and more busy, especially the Seashell pool, and when will the SCRD discuss future expansion of facilities? And that they were too small the day they were built. And I think, like, I'm going to comment, and I would welcome any other comments from directors or counselors or staff. For this term, recreation expansion is not a priority of the board. It was not in our strategic plan. When we talk about the number of issues we have around water, wastewater, solid waste, recreation does not rank highly on that list. On top of that, I mentioned the staffing issues a couple minutes ago, and fundamentally we have 3 pools and 2 ice rinks for 30,000 people. And so what level of service is appropriate in a community this size? I think there's a lot more to it than just saying, let's build a bigger anything. And certainly the pool in Seashelt was reasonable priced compared to the cost of building that infrastructure today. And that speaks to the inflationary pressures that government sees versus the consumer. Director Bax.
Yeah, I want to just say that I'm a regular user of the Seashelt Aquatic Center, and that the period of about 3 weeks around the Christmas holidays was exceedingly crowded. But outside of that, because people were here for holidays and schools were closed, etc. Before that, it was not exceedingly crowded, and I'm going to be going there again this week, and I don't expect it to be any more busy than it was in November. So it could be that the question is coming from someone who's been to the pool in the last couple of weeks when it was every day was packed, but that's an anomaly. That's a seasonal thing.
Thank you, Director Bax. I'm wondering if we had any questions from the person who is here in person. So we'll get you one of you guys can just pass your microphone back to Sue, or she can come to the table.
Thank you. So I am Sue Cools, and I live in Seashelt. And my question is, I understand what you have on your plate. I have a background in senior financial and human resource management, so I know what you have on your plate and what the priorities are. One thing I haven't heard discussed yet is any funding for wildlife management, particularly our bears. And this could fall under parks and public safety and waste management. Has there been any discussion about this in any of the groups yet?
Certainly not at the board table specifically, just answering for the regional district. Maybe I'll check with our CFO if there's been any discussion among the staff, and then I'll go to the other jurisdictions.
We support the Bear Aware. I'm not sure if that's the program still, but essentially through our solid waste service, that's definitely something we collaborate with through that service.
Through the Bear Alliance, you mean? Okay, because the CO has said that they will partner with the Bear Alliance, but one thing that the BCCOS has also done like the District of Squamish has hired a wildlife safety response officer, and it's a 5-year contract. It's all on the website, and they actually handle a lot more of the education that would needed for like our whole coast. The Bear Alliance does a lot of really great work in education, but I do believe we need more. Now, this response officer...
Sue, if I can just cut you off.
Yes.
You asked a question. I want to get the answers from the other 2 governments for you first, okay?
Okay, can I just add though, so this response officer, I'm wondering if any of these groups have been approached to consider this position within your budgets?
No. But John, I saw you put your...
We have not been approached.
Nope. No, we haven't. But it segues to another point.
Okay.
Okay, so then last part of my question is, there used to be some funding, it may have been in the SCRD budget, for a partial funding for a wild safe coordinator that was here for 6 months of the year. Is that still in the budget? I think it was about $4,000.
That's again part of the program that used to be. I'd have to verify that as to what the evolution of that program has been. So I don't have that with me now.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
But I will follow up with you with the answer to that question, Sue. Silas?
Yeah, I remember that from 2 terms ago, and the coordinator would come and make a presentation to us every year. But that hasn't happened the last couple of years, so it makes me curious about what became of that too.
For sure. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions from the public. So Silas, did you want to?
Yeah, coming from that question, I mean, I think we should acknowledge, and this connects to the question I asked the District of Sechelt too, is that the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society, it wasn't just funding for the coordinator, but they were basically asking for funding from all local governments for basically an executive director for their nonprofit. But it kind of came to us all individually too. So there was that one, and I know, as you've heard from our municipality, there isn't a lot of space to look at any kind of partnerships like this anymore, which is troubling because that WildSafe, like there are examples of where we funded. Chamber of Commerce has come asking for funds from all of us for a regional project. Connect the Coast from TRAC has come to each of us asking for funds for a staff person, basically, I think, to oversee their Connect the Coast project and to be, really transparent here. We're kind of, that isn't in the numbers you saw up there. That would be something that would have to be added to those percentage increases that we're looking at, and I'm pretty sure that also applies to the District of Sechelt and the SCRD's numbers there too. So I want to put that on the table because those groups did come to us, and I'm not kind of seeing a clear avenue right now for us to collaboratively, like whether it's the platform to do it, which we don't really have in those cases. They all kind of came to us separate delegations, or the funding. I'm just going to put it out there that it's looking very hard to be able to fund any of those projects for us. And I don't know. Since we're all together, this is an opportunity to hear from the others as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that's really well said, because it becomes very easy to say, well, gosh, we don't know what the other 2 or 3 jurisdictions are doing, so let's just park that for now, and it ends up not being dealt with. So how do we answer your question? Like, how do we get some consensus before we come back to our respective discussions? I think you've asked the right question, so we can think about that. I don't know if we can't have a budget meeting sitting right here. But we do, yeah, well said.
David?
Thank you. One of the things that I'd just like to sort of, and I don't mean this to sound like poking the bear, but one of the things that we're facing is a reduction in the revenue that comes from gas tax. And what are we doing collectively to advocate for alternate funding? Because, it was mentioned earlier, potholes, the cost of road maintenance, and one of the principal sources of revenue for that in the transition, and I'm not against the transition that's occurring, it's the revenue loss that we're now faced with, and what are we doing to advocate for the replacement of that revenue from other sources?
It's an interesting question. I was under the impression that the Community Works Fund agreement had just been renewed for another 10 years with sort of same levels of funding commitment from the federal government. Is that not the case, looking at the CFOs and CAOs in the back? David?
Yeah, that would be the case in ours. It's the same or similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that's something that we have struggled with the terminology change, because, you know, everybody calls it gas tax, but in actuality, it's been decoupled from the gas tax revenues for a number of years, which is why the program got renamed. We just continue to struggle with the the change in the funding source and the change in the allocations. So it's, I mean, we know that with our escalating infrastructure costs, though, we definitely need to keep advocating for more money out of the federal government where they can. But I think that the gas tax fund at least should be fairly stable for the next 10 years for us. Yeah. Any other discussion, Silas?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question, but I mean, I had some positive things to say at the start, so this is a natural segue to looking at the federal environment and looking at the provincial environment. I just need to put it out there on the table again that the Premier has opened up the new mandate for the provincial government with a hiring freeze, which shows us what kind of financial outlook the province is looking at. And the federal government, which Donna can talk all about, but we're looking, you know, we're probably looking at an election soon, and the polls are showing that we may get a prime minister who's been making statements lately that pretty much any government any money that goes to local government, including that community works fund gas tax we just talked about, is just wasted on bloated bureaucracy or whatever phrases he uses. But that's his outlook. So I'm just putting it out there. We've got to be pretty concerned about our financial, you know, in contrast to what I was talking about earlier about the need for more senior level government funding and what we just talked about with the gas tax for our asset management. Things are not looking promising at the political level for that need being met by the political environments right now at those two senior levels of government.
No, good point. Anything else from anybody? Something a little more cheery? Director Bax? Adam?
I want to talk more about the air curtain burner.
Let's take that one offline. Adam?
I'm just wondering if, I mean, there are obviously items that each of the governments, their sort of joint capital projects that each will look into, decide whether they can fund or not. And I'm wondering, as all of the budget processes are roughly aligned anyway, couldn't there be one budget session where the CFOs are meeting together and they have a list of potentially shared costs? Economic development is one of them. And, you know, if one government, for whatever reason, cannot fund it, it really comes down to the other two, whether it's a high enough priority to fund or not. But at least there would be that one session. Maybe I'm naive and it's already happening, but.
Well, and it's interesting because I was actually thinking about this venue and how I was wondering how it was going to work out. But now that we're here and now that we're talking and we've got our staff in the room with us, I think it's been quite useful just from an educating myself about like what Gibson's is doing. And I think it's too late to really look at it this year because like the SCRD is about to do its last round of budget on Monday and then move towards bylaws. But I think it's something that perhaps we can all look at for 2026, trying to do something in the early fall or something like that. Silas and then Kelly.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the conversations I've been having with individual councillors, at least, about some of these requests too, are, I mean, if we don't have the funding for some of these requests. Are there other ways that we can support? And I mean, like Connect the Coast has asked us before in some of their grant applications, it's required. How much staffing time are you can the local government allocate to this project that we're applying for a grant for? And I mean, maybe all of our staff are busy enough as it is. I want to acknowledge that right off the top, and are doing, they're under all these pressures we're talking about. But I mean, that's maybe some of them might align in some ways, because I mean, active transportation is obviously a big one that we're already having to look at internally. So there's that kind of conversation that may need to be had too. Is like, well, how can we work together by coordinating some staff time to put towards these projects, whether it's Connect the Coast or affordable housing, which should be an easy one because we're all having to. That's a big priority for all of us too. Or economic development. I mean, I think the reality is I think the Economic Development Office in Gibson's is Manny's office. It's across the hallway from me. That's where it defaults to, and it has for a lot of years, many years now, because it wasn't being picked up regionally.
Yeah, I'd like to say I absolutely see the merit in this format. This is it's been a really good session this afternoon, and I see it as being very informative going into our second round of budget. But I don't see this as just being a budgetary type of format, and I do like the cooperative form of government rather than confrontational. And I think that if we were to meet 3 times a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, or something like that, and a 3-hour session a couple of times a year would really help to keep everybody on the same page. We all live in this not an island peninsula, the Sunshine Coast, and so we do have a lot of shared responsibilities to our constituents, and I think I think this format is a real winner, and commend whoever thought of putting this all together.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you, Director Bax. Donna?
I think that at the very least, we should try and look at something within 6 months, because we'll know more around what the federal budget is, not budget necessarily, but who's going to be the leadership. We'll have a little better sense of what some of the direction might be and who's going to be in government, basically. We'll know more about the province in terms of what their budget is, because we might have to do some pivoting. And it may be the time to just really take a look at that, our budgets, within 6 months.
Thank you. Director Gabius?
Thank you. And just on that, I think this would be a great format too, where we can talk about regional advocacy and where we can all come together, and especially with the change in government potentially and all the changes happening, stronger together. Yeah.
Go ahead, Director McMahon.
I was a little flippant before, but I am concerned about our borrowing room because, of course, all the local government borrowing comes through the SCRD. And even though we have somewhat different taxpayers, the level of debt that we take on is a matter of concern. And I'm looking at the level of debt that the SCRD is anticipating over the next few years. And I'm really pretty concerned about it. So I would like to see a capital project forecast for major capital projects, however we define major, and sort of a borrowing forecast so that we can be aware of what's coming at us.
I'm sorry to shift back to one item, but this is a little bit lower level, but it's still really big. I just noticed 3 letters I'd written here as DCC. And I mean, as William mentioned, we've done our DCC's review, and we're looking at, I don't know, William, if you have like a range of those increases, but like the 200% level sticks in my head. Some of them were higher, actually. Some of them were lower, but we're looking at massive, massive increases to our DCCs, and it's gonna, I mean, and meanwhile, the provincial government's like putting pressure on us to build more housing. It's like, well, here, this is gonna be, the cost of maintaining our assets and expanding on our assets for growth are so significant that we're not gonna be able to do it. Like, I don't know, I mean, there's not many developers who are gonna be able to afford this, and it's a regional issue because, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. If like, I know developers who own property in Sechelt and Gibsons, or if they're going to go to Gibsons and say, okay, well, we can't afford to develop our property here, we'll go to Sechelt. It's like, okay, great for you guys, but on the other hand, it's not good for you guys because you're going to get the shortfall if you don't have the DCCs that are at the same level as ours. You're going to be stuck with a shortfall that your property taxes are going to have to cover. And same goes for the SCRD, and I know the SCRD's got a really big struggle in terms of updating DCCs, and it's something that I think has been worked on and looking at bridging that. So I want to, again, look at all our CFOs maybe to, what the hell are we going to do here?
On DCC rate changes based on the town's work, so the proposed increases, the minimum is 100%. There are a number of items that are 300%, 400%. And notwithstanding those are huge increases, by way of comparison, if you do a broad comparative across the lower mainland, and I mean all the way out to Chilliwack and Hope and everybody broadly out there, the rates after these adjustments up will either be the same or a bit less than the ones existing there. And many of the DCC rates in those local governments have been recently reset. So once the big push from senior government started on increased housing, there was increased effort to update the DCC rates as fast as possible. But yeah, it's big. Well, I should leave it at that. Take us into the trees.
Dave, did you want to speak to the
I
Sechelt?
just want to say that our DCCs are being reviewed right now. So within the next 4 months or so, we'll be hearing something. Yeah.
And then Tina.
I've already identified that I need to speak to my counterparts because we were told by the province when researching it last year that we were not in a position to review our DCC bylaws. And that was because of the constraint related to our long-range planning in some areas. However, I'm going to revisit it because I think we should be doing something.
And especially if it's something that we can somewhat do together, then you're not going to get a big, massive shift of development from one place to another, looking for the cheapest place to get the DCCs, right? So, okay. Leonard.
I was listening to increased DCCs and increased climate change readiness. All I heard was more costs for property, more costs to someone wanting to buy a house. How the hell can you have affordable when we're being forced by governments, we're being forced by economic conditions? I don't know how that's going to work and how that's going to land. I don't know. I'm happy to hear that our DCCs will be the same throughout the province. But maybe they all need to be lower rather than higher.
You can't afford to. Property taxes go up.
Well, you were talking about other sources of income, and that's what does it, is the other sources of revenue. It's traditional we're talking rather than something new to make it happen. Anyways, I just wanted to think about that. I'm not saying let's not do it. I'm just saying let's be really careful what we're up to.
And it's interesting, I see your hand, David, don't worry. But I know that a number of UBCM motions have talked about updating funding formulas to municipalities and to regional districts, because the property tax model is not, that's not enough. We can never raise taxes enough to pay for everything. And it's not fair that existing property owners should have to bear the costs of new people coming to a community, or what proportion of those costs they should bear, for sure, is an important balance to find. David?
Thank you, Director Toth. And to Director Lee's comment, in the formulas that we were looking at with the increase to the DCCs, what was discouraged is the big single-family home, and what's encouraged in the rates is multifamily. So there is a potential plus there that you get economy of scale building multifamily as opposed to the 6,000 square foot house for two people.
Said, as William noted, it's still 100 to 400%. Like, they're all going up. Yeah, even though some are going up more than others for that. Trying to, yeah.
For sure. So it is 3:30. This is what we were scheduled to run to. Was there any last words from anybody looking around this table and also looking at the staff table in the back? Any other words from anybody? Donna?
I just would like to suggest again, with the intergovernmental meeting we have, maybe it's an intergovernmental, it's 6 months, whenever that is, that it's the time to invite whoever is the new leader or in the Liberal Party for our MP as well as our MLA. Because I think it's a really good idea to keep them informed rather than uninformed. And often when we go to them, it's just about specific issues. So I think if we can not overwhelm them, but if there's any regional advocacy information that we can put in there, then we'll work on that. Because that's really their role for us. We know that, both our MLA and our MP, they're the advocates for us, back to Ottawa and they're back to Victoria. So the more we can inform them in, in ways that are sort of measurable, strategic, I think that would be very helpful.
We were actually talking about advocacy over lunch. So hearing what you have to say, I think Justine will be reaching out.
Good. I'm all for that.
Okay. Oh my goodness. I have a speakers list again.
Yes,
Here
you
I
do.
thought we were done for the day. Go ahead, Kelly, and then Donna.
Talking about advocacy, I just received an email from BC Ferries. They're having a couple of advocacy pieces going on next Wednesday and Thursday. And I've signed up for the Wednesday session. And I think and it's for local government leaders. And so I imagine you'll all be receiving that email. And so I think that's another issue altogether.
Great.
I'll be there.
Thank you, Kelly. Donna?
I was just going to suggest, as the other Donna suggested, getting together, maybe June would be good, because that would position us prior to UBCM. And we'd be coming out of AVICC, so.
Excellent. Great idea.
Thank you. All right. I guess I'll say a couple words here. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Those who are following along at home, or those you want to share the information with, this meeting is available on YouTube, so it'll be saved forevermore. And further information on each local government's budget can be found on their website. So that's scrd.ca, gibsons.ca, and seashelt.ca, or by contacting any one of the elected representatives for the Sunshine Coast. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for those tuning in. Thank you for the one member of the gallery who joined us in person today. And we'll see you all later.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.